Tonight, this episode of It's Your Call is one of our continuing series dedicated to facing the mortgage crisis, brought to you with the support of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Good evening, I'm your host, Roger Bowman. Some homeowners are finding themselves in a place they have never been before and are trying to find out what to do. Many have lost their jobs. The APRs have gone up on their homes and they can no longer pay their mortgages. Where can they turn? We hope to answer these questions and more this evening. My guests this evening are Ryan Escamilla-Woods. He's a homeowner retention specialist with the Neighborhood Partnership Housing Services in Ontario. And Melinda Opperman, Vice President of Community Outreach for Springboard Nonprofit Consumer Credit Management in Riverside. I'd like you to call with your questions of our guests. The toll-free number is 866-367-5827. Melinda, Ryan, welcome to the show. First thing, Ryan, did I get your name correct?
It's Escamilla.
Escamilla.
Yes.
Thank you very much. So tell me, what organization are you with and how did you get involved?
I'm with Neighborhood Partnership Housing Services. We're located in Ontario, California. We've been around for 17 years now. We started in Montclair. And how I got involved is basically working within the servicing industry. I then wanted to take that experience and then educate the public or my community.
Okay, so your name is a little bit ambiguous. Tell us what it is you do generally in non-crisis times, and tell us what you're doing now specifically.
As far as...
What does your organization help people with?
We assist homeowners with basically down payment assistance. We offer free foreclosure counseling. We offer free foreclosure workshops every first and third Thursday of the month. And we have fall prevention grants for homeowners. The age requirement is 55 or above, and it's to prevent them from falling or slipping in the home.
Okay, so what you just said surprised me a little bit, and I want to be clear on this.
Okay.
55 or above. So you actually target the senior citizens in our community, helping them keep their homes. Is that right?
As far as keeping homes, no. What that grant specifically does is it will give minor repairs to them. Basically, anything that would cause them to fall or to harm themselves, such as if they need a lighting fixture replaced, we will go ahead and replace that for them at no cost. If they need a wheelchair ramp or a bar in the restroom to hold on to while they bathe, we'll go ahead and replace that free of charge for them.
I see. And I'm sorry about that, Ryan. It
That's
looks
okay.
like I missed the distinction between the foreclosure workshops and the other services you did. And just to be clear, you are offering these foreclosure workshops twice a month.
Correct.
But separate and completely distinct, you also offer services to seniors to help their residents be more habitable to them. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Wonderful. And Melinda, tell us, same question. How did you get involved and what's your organization?
Well, the organization is Springboard, and it's a nonprofit credit counseling agency. We're also a HUD-approved housing counseling agency. We offer comprehensive housing. And in that regard, as far as speaking about foreclosure prevention and homeownership preservation, we're dedicated to that. We also offer home buyer education. We also offer credit counseling. And then if someone's in a difficult situation and may possibly be thinking of bankruptcy, there's a requirement to have pre-bankruptcy counseling and debtor education, personal financial literacy courses offered to folks. So we also provide that. So we're a very robust counseling agency.
That might explain why all the 211 directors knew of Springboard right off the top of their head. So it appears you work pretty closely with the 211 services. Is that accurate?
That's correct. 211 has been a great resource to the Inland Empire and beyond. 211 is, of course, nationwide, and so they've been a great resource to people during this difficult time, and we've been glad to partner with them.
Now, it's early in the show, and I don't want to challenge you, but I want to address something that came out from one of our viewers just last week. Mm-hmm. And they said that they had gone to several of the services that are out there in an attempt to get information about how to save, in this case, the man's home. And he said that he felt that they were monetarily driven and that they were disingenuous. And he mentioned Springboard by name. Mm-hmm. And so each of the 211 directors attested that you're not for profit and that you are legitimate But I want you to reaffirm that if you don't mind, or tell us what the situation is.
Well, that's great feedback. I hadn't heard any type of feedback like that before. I don't dispute that somebody maybe made that remark, but that is a surprise. We're a 35-year-old nonprofit credit counseling agency. We've been in the Inland Empire and trusted by Inland Empire folks and beyond for 35 years. We originally started as consumer credit counseling of the Inland Empire. And then about 8 years ago, we outgrew our geographic borders, so to speak. We have offices throughout Southern California, all the way from San Diego up to the Central Valley, and we even have offices in Arizona and Nevada. So as we outgrew the consumer credit counseling of the Inland Empire, we adopted a name which is called Springboard, kind of common vernacular name. And they were also part of the HOPE hotline, the 888-995-HOPE hotline.
And where would people have heard about that?
That's recommended at the highest congressional levels. Many of the materials that are about the Making Home Affordable program, they recommend that consumers call that hotline, and we're one of 9 lead agencies on that hotline. So if the caller that had the concern, I would love for them to please reach out to me even personally so I could speak with them about their concern. The counseling that we offer is free. There's no charge.
Now, to be fair, I do recognize that not everybody will have a fantastic experience, especially if they go in and they're already having difficulty in their situation. And you never know if you get somebody that's great or having a bad day on the other end. But most people have attested that Springboard is a fantastic service. And Springboard also happens to have one of those memorable names. And I've seen that because everybody here, when I ask what partners that we've been speaking to, Springboard is the first thing that springs into mind. So I would offer that if you have talked to several different agencies, that one might be the one that you would remember most, the name of when you had to do it.
Oh, I see. So possibly it was another agency, not ours. We just had the memorable name. That could be true. And
I'm not saying that's the case. It's possible.
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about well, actually, first, we already have callers in. I knew that was going to happen and I want to let our viewers know, these are the people that can actually answer some questions for us. We're glad to have you in studio today. So let's go to a comment. This is Gene from Palm Springs. You're on the air. It's your call. Gene, what's your question?
Well, I have a statement. I'm just wondering why that someone hasn't told the homeowners that they have 90 days from the day of the service of the notice of default before they have to move. During the first 60 days, they can renew the loan or bring the loan current at their option. And I'm just wondering why someone hasn't mentioned that on your program.
Okay, so his question is about the 90-day moratorium and the 60-day foreclosure process. Let's talk a little bit about what is that foreclosure process. Not addressing the 90-day moratorium that we've heard about recently. What is the foreclosure process?
Okay. No, typically a homeowner has 3 months of going without making a mortgage payment before the loan would be referred to the foreclosure department. Now, once it goes to the foreclosure department, it doesn't mean that the homeowner has actually lost the home. It's just in a different area. So for the homeowner, it's going to cost them just a little bit more to bring that loan current. However, the foreclosure process itself can take anywhere from 6 months to a year. But the homeowner has all the way up until the actual sale date to try to work something out with the lender before the house is lost. So if the sale date has come and now passed, at that point the homeowner wouldn't have any option. But they do have an option to work something out with their lender all the way up until the actual sale date.
So the first step, I think, is they get a notice of default. Once the foreclosure department decides we're going to proceed, they get a notice of default, certified mail, I think.
Correct.
That means that they're actually in foreclosure, or that's the first step. What does that signify?
The notice of default is basically the last letter from the collection department advising the homeowner, you have 30 days from the date of this letter to contact us to make some sort of arrangement. Otherwise, we will pursue further action, which will be foreclosure.
So letter of default does not mean foreclosure. What's the next step? We don't do anything for 30 days. We're not economically viable to do it. What's our next step?
I would say contact the lender, even though you may not have the ability to do anything right then and there. Your lender may have some sort of option that may allow you to go a couple of months without making a mortgage payment, allowing you that time to get back on your feet so that way you don't have to worry about foreclosure.
And I just want to let our viewers know, I have personal experience to that. I know somebody who did, in fact, and seemingly surprisingly easy, was able to obtain a payment deferral on one of the loans the person had. The person had a first and a second, and one of those they put in a 3-month deferral, I believe it was, and just did it almost over the phone.
And for the homeowners, that would be called a forbearance plan or a special forbearance agreement. So that's what allows the homeowner or allows the lender to reduce or suspend their monthly payment for a period of time.
Is that something that the banks do voluntarily, or is that term that you use, the forbearance, is that something that Congress is pushing for? How does that come about?
It's something that the lenders already do within their system.
So in this case, look for special forbearance. Mm-hmm. Let's say that doesn't work. What's the next step that the homeowner that's not paying, not current, will see? What's the next action taken against them?
Again, if they do not have the ability to afford the mortgage payment, if they've tried to contact the lender and there was no workout solution at that particular time, then the loan would run its course with the collection process and then eventually go to foreclosure. However, again, all the way up until the actual sale date, the homeowner has that time to still work something out. So even if the loan did go to foreclosure, and let's say they were out of work or unemployed for some time, and now they do have employment, once they receive an acceptance letter from their employer or they were given an offer, they can then contact their lender and say, look, I now have employment, this is what my wages will be, here is a list of my monthly expenses. Now can we do something to get myself back on track?
And that's a really good point, Ryan, about getting back on track. And when the caller mentioned about the 90 days, that's so important that people do realize that there is that window at the beginning. 90 days before the actual notice of default is filed in California, because things can vary by state. But in California, and in that window of time, it's really important to open lines of communication with your lender if you haven't already. And then after that notice of default is filed, time will kind of move by quickly, and in the event maybe for whatever reason they've procrastinated possibly in reaching out to the lender because it's a very stressful time, the next thing that would happen is the notice of sale. And that's when things are typically giving you notice that in 21 days this property will be sold. So it's best to contact early on. There's more options and solutions the earlier they reach out to the lender. And the HUD-approved housing counseling agencies like Ryan and my agencies, correct, and all the agencies nationwide, which you can look up at HUD.gov, are here to help.
So you mentioned notice of sale. What does the word foreclosure specifically signify? And the reason I ask is there's anticipated that there will be 4 million foreclosures this year. So 4 million people apparently are going to go through the entire process we're articulating. And we want them not only to know the good advice of reach out to you or reach out to the lender, but to give them an idea of what their experience is going to be. And I think more importantly, to let them know the point of no return versus when they still have a chance. Because Ryan, as you aptly pointed out, until the unit is sold, they still have a chance to renegotiate. But correct, a lot of people I've heard feel that once they get these official notices, it's done, there's nothing they can do, which might not be accurate.
That's not accurate, and it's kind of counterintuitive because sometimes folks get that notice and they think that means they need to move out of the property right then and there. And especially when the intent is to keep a home, it's most important to stay in the home. And again, open lines of communication with that lender. And sometimes if a situation is truly so incurable, in a sense that the homeowner may be in a situation, health reasons, maybe a spouse isn't earning income, other family members or roommates couldn't move in, lender doesn't have a situation to help them. Correct. It's really an economically depressed situation. There's still other assistance available. Lenders can offer pre-foreclosure sales. Some offer short sales. And so that kind of helps a homeowner because now the fear is gone because at least they know what to expect. And many times there's even cash for keys. So you can have a homeowner in a home 6, 7, 9 months, and it gets to a situation where they do need to relocate, but by working with the lender and the housing counseling agency, there's some structure because now they know what to expect.
And I just wanted to go back on what you said, that being in communication with your lender early on prepares them, and then they can go ahead and take a look at your loan during this time to see what they can actually do for you. They may be able to give you a modification as low as 2%, maybe extend the term of the loan out as far as 40 years, and if that is still not enough, they can then go ahead and look at reducing some of the principal balance. But if the homeowner does vacate the property because of fear once they receive the notice of default or the notice of the trustee's sale, it is possible that the lender may not work with them because one of the requirements is that the property has to be owner occupied.
Okay, so you're saying once they vacate,
Right.
then they're not able to work with them.
Right.
Yes.
So let's say I received a notice of default or a notice of trustee's sale. If I were to vacate the property, even though the house hasn't gone through the whole foreclosure process, if the lender finds out that the property is vacant, they will actually send somebody out, which is, they will call a property inspector. They'll send that property inspector out to actually change the locks on the property just to secure their investment. Once that's done, then chances are the lender may not want to work with me because I've basically skipped town.
Okay. I have heard that up to 1/3 of the foreclosures are on homes that are renter occupied as opposed to owner occupied. They are occupied, people are living in them, but it's a renter. What happens in that situation? Does that differ, and are banks less likely to negotiate?
It's a case-by-case basis.
True.
If it's investment property,
Very true.
it may be a case-by-case basis. However, I assure you the lender still wants to hear from individuals, and we have had workout situations on properties that aren't owner-occupied. For example, being here in California, we've got a military community here. So they've maybe been deployed elsewhere. Their home is here, it's in a renter situation, it's occupied. So again, it can be case-by-case basis. But the main message is just don't panic, which is natural when you get that certified letter, and prematurely leave your home. That's the point.
Okay, so let's take another call. Jorge from Moreno Valley, it's your call. What's your question, Jorge?
Hey, I have a question. I'm trying to do a loan modification through my mortgage company, but they're telling me that their mortgage company is not offering any loan modifications at all. And they're strictly telling me, I can't do it with no one or even with an attorney. How is that?
Good question.
That's a great question.
Very good
Because there
question.
is a case-by-case situation in the sense that it can vary for different lenders depending on who an investor is for a particular loan.
Correct.
So sometimes you can have a situation where due to investor requirements, those options aren't available. However, you still want to open the lines of communication with the lender and get that information. But what's so important about what he said is he heard that from his lender. And what's terrific about his call is lots of times folks will not reach out to the lender and they will pay the for-profit loan modification consultants. Sometimes a large amount of money. He even mentioned how an attorney may not or wouldn't. I think he actually said an attorney couldn't even help him either, as lender said. And that's important to know because sometimes people have paid several $1,000s that they've borrowed and paid to maybe someone who isn't a legitimate proprietor. And now they're also out that money and they didn't get that solution that they were looking for. And that precious money could have been used to relocate and find a new home. It's very, very sad. The goal is always to keep people in their homes. Home ownership is key, but then not losing money and valuable time is also important.
Yes, and
I just wanted to add to that too. in some cases, you have homeowners who will pay a for-profit company a large fee, assuming that they're going to get a modification. In most cases, if they would have only contacted the lender, they could have only paid a small portion of the past due amount to set up some sort of arrangement with their lender to get themselves back on track. But even more so, they could have kept funds in their pocket to pay off other debt or to buy other necessities that they need for their home. As far as the lender and the investor goes, for example, you have City Mortgage, who out of 100% of the loans that they actually service, only 39% of those loans they actually own. So the other percentage of those loans could be owned by a private investor, it could be owned by a corporation, it could be owned by one individual or a group of individuals. However, if the mortgage company or the lender does not actually own that loan, the homeowner as well as the lender are at the mercy of whoever owns the loan as far as what the outcome of a loan modification or a repayment plan or a forbearance agreement would be.
So, Ryan, to recap, and this is kind of critical because we've heard about these loan modification opportunities. We've heard, and Melinda, you stated, be sure to be in communication with the lender. Mm-hmm. But we've had many people call and say that their banks were dragging their feet in communicating back with them. And this caller, thank goodness, got information. The information wasn't positive, but at least he knows where he stands.
Right.
You're suggesting that 39% of the loans in Citibank's case that are owned by Citibank are modifiable at Citibank's discretion.
Correct.
But the other, in this case, 61%, they can't touch. They can't do anything without going through a third party that actually owns the paper. Is that?
Exactly.
So they can't speak on behalf of the subordinate investor and make that decision. It has to actually trickle down.
Correct.
To potentially somebody who's just a speculative stock investor in derivatives somewhere around the world.
Right. And in a lot of cases, you'll have a homeowner who contacts the loss mitigation department or the collection department, and they will hear from the representative, you don't meet the investor guidelines, or, due to investor guidelines, we need this particular information. So that's advising the homeowner that someone else may actually own their loan.
That's kind of a key word to look for.
Correct.
Because that probably signals more restricted options. Is that fair to say?
Again, it's case by case, so I can't really answer that.
And there's additional programs that were recently rolled out. For example, the Making Home Affordable program from President Obama. And that program, while all lenders, servicers may not be participating in that program, a large amount are. However, we have found at Springboard some of the lenders or servicers that may not be participating in that specific program have mirrored a program much like it. So that's why it's so important, again, open lines of communication with the lender. And if there is some news that maybe isn't as desirable as your caller heard, at least hear it right away. And the people that we do reach out to that we have found, even if it is a trickle down to another level in a servicing area, that information is easily obtainable and can be provided simply.
Okay, I have a couple follow-up questions, but our callers want to ask the questions too. So we're going to go out. Let's go out to Palm Springs first. Russell, it's your call. What's your question, Russell?
Yes, I'm wondering what I can do about the dilemma that we're in. Our original mortgage, which was an ARM with World Savings, was to have our rate increased once a year. A couple months after taking out that loan, Wachovia bought them out. They started raising our interest rates every month. I contacted them. They said, sorry, but that's the way it's going to be. But after 1 year, you can lock in a 30-year fixed mortgage. We locked in at 7.16. Our mortgage payment went from $2,400 a month to $3,700 a month.
Ouch.
I've contacted Wachovia regarding the mortgage modification program, and they were going to send out an inspector or an appraiser to appraise the house to see what could be done. They did not send out an appraiser. They sent out an inspector. The guy came into the house. He turned on water faucets. He flushed toilets. He turned on the showers. He turned on the water in the tubs. He turned on lights, turned off lights, looked at the roof, stuck a probe into the outlets to make sure that there was electricity coming to the outlets, and left. And came in at a what I have heard from several friends of mine who are realtors, that he lowballed the appraisal. I called Wachovia back again. Well, actually, it was Wachovia again. Called him back, talked to a very nice, knowledgeable person there who said that they have received numerous complaints about Wachovia and them sending out inspectors rather than appraisers.
And is that what's affecting your ability to get the loan modification, is the low appraisal?
That's correct.
Okay, so let's address that. Melinda?
Well, he has been very diligent in everything he has done. It's got to be a frustrating process, but he has done an outstanding job. And as far as responsibility factor, he's at the top of the scale, and that's really important. As far as with the particular lender, I would suggest reaching out to a HUD-approved housing counseling agency just to see if they could maybe provide some more information and kind of see if there's some other solutions available. And that's what I would suggest. We would love it if you call one of our two agencies, but again, you could go to the HUD.gov website or could even call the 888-995-HOPE and talk with a counselor there.
Okay, so that is great advice. I was wondering if you have something a little more specific. Is it true that for these loan modifications, the homes have to be at a particular value relative to the amount that your loan is?
Brian, maybe they're thinking of the net present value. Do you think that's a calculation?
Right. And that would apply more to the home affordable plan. Basically, the plan that President Obama rolled out. The loan would have to be backed by either Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac in order to qualify for that particular refinance. If it's not backed by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, and if they want to find out if their loan is backed by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, they can go to FannieMae.com or they can go to FreddieMac.com. There is a link, I believe, in the bottom right corner of those websites where they can actually type in their property address and see if their loan is actually backed by that entity. But as far as the caller situation, I too want to congratulate him or give him a praise for being patient in the whole process. But if he wants to go one step further, the only suggestion that I have is that he can call, ask to speak with the loss mitigation department, and see, once they transfer him to that department, see if they can put him in contact with a supervisor. And then once they've done that, see if that supervisor can email the processor that was assigned to his loan to see if they can do the refinance on the house and advise them, look, the house was lowballed. However, based on comps and several other appraisers, the house is valued a little bit more. So is it possible we can have that appraiser go back out and take another look at the property to see if he missed something?
I remember when the housing bubble was in effect and I bought a piece of property, that the appraiser came out and asked me to provide comps. So I actually worked with a local realtor to obtain 5 comps in the neighborhood. He had pulled a couple off of a basic website, and his were too different than my unit, and it was too far away, I thought, to be a viable comp when there were obviously comparable units sold very close.
Right.
And I pulled those and provided that person with those about 2 days into the process after I saw what comps the person was going to use and how dissimilar it was to my property. So
that's a very good suggestion, Roger. Yes. Do your own kind of comparables.
Right. You have websites such as Zillow.com. It's not, I wouldn't say it's exactly on the money, but it can give you an idea. Or you can go to Realtor.com, type in your property address there, and it will give you pretty good statistics and information based on home values within your neighborhood.
Right, and of course, a lot of people don't want to see that information. I'm one of them. I don't want to see how bad it's gotten.
Yeah. And if possibly the caller was speaking of the program, the one that they can be slightly underwater, like 105%.
Right.
Just be a little bit underwater. That's the refinance part of it, but there's also the loan modification part of it. So possibly the topic you were speaking of earlier, where lower the interest rate to the 2%, extend the term 40 years, defer a portion of the balance. Not saying that that's necessarily available for this particular caller's loan, but it may be for someone else's, so explore that too.
Right.
Okay, now I have a couple of follow-up questions, but I want to take callers. So let's go out to, how about Ernest in Huntington Park? Ernest, it's your call. What's your question?
To cancel that one, I just realized what it is. It's bankers, in other words, high rollers area. So that's forget about it. Thank you very much.
Ernest, do you have a question for us? You said that you figured it out. Okay, we're going to take another caller. How about Oscar from Fontana? Oscar, you're on the air. What's your question?
Yes, I was in Ryan's seminar class last night in Ontario, my wife and I, and he answered a lot of questions and a lot of things I didn't understand, and I understand them real fully now that he put it out there, and it was just perfect. I haven't had a chance to go back to him yet, but we're going to get all our paperwork and everything together, and we're going to go back there. So he did a really terrific job.
Thank you.
You remember me, right, Ryan? Me and my wife?
What's that?
Okay.
Okay, so wonderful. He mentioned that he was flipping through the channels.
Oh, okay.
And he saw you. So what he wanted to do is say he's been to one of your loan modification seminars, and it was very valuable, and he wanted to say thank you. And indeed, this is something that a lot of people don't know about. We are building out a website and listing the seminars, and I don't think yours is there yet because it's literally the content is being built out over this week and the next week. But we're going to consolidate all the seminars. There's many more out there than I was even aware of, and we have to get your twice monthly seminars in there.
Okay.
That's a good point. There's many HUD-approved housing counseling agencies in the Inland Empire that are doing seminars like ours, and we're also participating in clinics that are often offered where the community is coming together with elected officials, community stakeholders, and responding to help the community too. So I know you'll be putting those events up too, I hope.
Okay, I have another caller. So we're going to go out to Jack from Norwalk. Jack, you're on the air. What's your question?
I have a question about Fannie Mae. When you do contact Fannie Mae, we went through Acorn. How long does it usually take? We got a big balloon payment due in September, and it's been over 30 days now. Is there a general set rule of time? Thank you.
Good rule of thumb for how long it takes.
Very good question. He said his loan is going to get ready to adjust pretty soon. If he wants to put more pressure on the investor, I would advise him to wait about 30 to 45 days just before the loan gets ready to reset or adjust. And what that will do is cause the investor to take a look at the loan and say, hey, this loan is getting ready to reset within 30 to 45 days. Up to this point, the homeowner has been able to make the monthly payments. Let me see what I can do to make this loan more affordable for them, so that way I do not have another foreclosure on my books.
I agree that would create pressure for the investor, but at the same time, the homeowners are the ones with the most vulnerability. Investors, prospectively, have invested discretionary income into these instruments that are backed by mortgages, and the homeowners have invested their life in being in a home. So it feels a little like you're playing chicken and you're seeing which one is going to blink first. Is it risky to wait that long?
I would say reach out sooner. I personally would. Reason being is a lot of the language that we're seeing now, and the lenders are very aware of this, is imminent risk of foreclosure. So if something doesn't happen in whatever short period of time, I will be in imminent risk of foreclosure because of the payment shock situation.
That's a good characterization, Ryan. I bet what you're talking, or I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I have seen this where it took either getting right to the point where there's going to be a problem or even going into arrears to get somebody's attention. Is that what you're saying? Is that the experience you're seeing out there?
again, case by case, but from what I've seen and what I still continue to see is homeowners who do have a fixed mortgage, if their loan is not backed by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, chances are there would have to be a past due amount on the account in order for the loan to be looked at or even reviewed for a modification. However, if the homeowner themselves chooses to allow the loan to go in default, there is no guarantee that once the loan is being reviewed for a modification, that the investor, one, will either agree to modify that loan or to modify that loan to a payment that the homeowner is comfortable with.
Okay, what you're saying isn't what we want to hear, but it's the reality, and we appreciate that. What you've just suggested clarifies something that I've heard as a question several times, and that is, do you need to be current or do you need to be in arrears? What you're saying is if it's not Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac backed, then very often, only in the condition of being in arrears, will anybody even take the time to look at your loan?
I mean, the homeowner can, I would recommend actually contacting your lender, speaking with the loss mitigation department, and once they transfer you, ask that department, are you or do you have any programs available for homeowners who are current? That will eliminate all of the guessing and wondering and the hearsay. So once their lender advises them, yes, we do have programs for homeowners who are current, you now know that you can apply for a modification. However, if your lender says no, then chances are there would have to be a past due amount or the loan would have to be in default in order for you to be reviewed.
And what I would recommend in that situation is then clarifying with the lender, you're asking that I be delinquent in order to be helped, and get that even documented, because we really do not advocate anyone ever deliberately becoming delinquent to try to solicit help. We call that credit score suicide. And a lot of people think if they do that, they may solicit help, and then they find out later they may have other complications. Maybe a program that would have been available to them required them to be current. Or possibly they've got a background check on a job that's just come up and they're looking at the credit report and then they see the recent delinquencies and it could affect a security check because a lot of different industries do require those. And then another thing, credit scores are looked at for things as simple as just getting competitive auto insurance, and you wouldn't want a premium to go up because you look like a risky payer. So we're really cautious from Springboard in making sure that folks do not think that they need to create a false situation.
Correct.
But at the same time, some people, for lack of lender cooperation, they're headed that way anyway.
Someone could become delinquent because they're not receiving the assistance. That's correct. Someone could become delinquent.
Okay. We have several calls. You've touched a couple of things. Let's go to Lonnie in Fontana. Hi, Lonnie. You're on the air. What's your question?
I did go to HUD to see if they could help us with a refi, and they asked, are we Fannie Mae and we are. And then the hang-up as to why they wouldn't go ahead and help us is because they say we have a non-conforming loan. We're on a 5-year arm. So it's a 5-year arm that they call a non-conforming loan. And because of that, and we are current, so it's a program we're looking for that we are current. However, when the 5-year arm changes things, then we're really going to be in trouble because work has gone so slow. Mm-hmm. We're afraid actually then is when we're going to lose our home.
Good question.
So you're being really proactive. So it's how much distance before it's going to reset? A year?
But one would think that with the publicity around the Obama plan and makehomeaffordable.gov, that you would, if you are Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac backed, that you would qualify for some type of modification. Is she saying that there are exceptions and nuances even within that, in her case, a non-conforming loan? Do either of you know what a non-conforming loan criteria might be?
That I could not answer. But I do know that even with the plan administered by President Obama, he did leave it up to the investor's discretion to change some of the requirements just to get them to come on board to even do that particular program. So even though you go to Fannie Mae, you go to makinghomeaffordable.com and you type in your information and it says based on the information that you put, you do qualify for this. However, once they start reviewing your loan for that particular program, your investor may have changed some of the requirements. So now you don't qualify for that particular program. But in the caller's case, because she stated that the loan was backed by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, she would need to speak with the loss mitigation department, and they would be able to give her more detailed information on her loan and whether or not it qualifies.
Okay, I'm going to jump to another call. Let's go to Montclair. Paul, it's your call. What's your question, Paul?
Hi, I wanted to know that when you get the certified letter, will it actually say you're in foreclosure?
Using that word, that's a question I have. I've gotten that
Foreclosure
question
is
a
a
lot.
scary word.
Well, the word foreclosure, does it mean the sale? Does it mean the notice of sale 21 days out? Does it mean the entirety of that period of time that you said can take 6 months and perhaps up to a year? What does the word foreclosure actually mean?
Foreclosure is the legal action of repossessing the property.
For non-payment.
For non-payment. And if there is any equity in it, the equity would be lost. So it's using an analogy of a car repossession. It's a foreclosure or repossession of the home. So the notice of default is letting folks know that they're at risk of foreclosure.
Of foreclosure. So that's the at risk of.
Correct.
And then it seems to me if there's another notice 21 days out from the sale, but the foreclosure process is potentially 6 months, is there anything in between that says you're now really, truly in foreclosure?
Well, it states in the notice of default that once this letter expires, at any point, the loan will go to foreclosure. So that's notification right there, that once this letter expires, that you tomorrow may end up in foreclosure.
You'll get some sort of notice when that occurs, will you not?
The notice of sale.
The notice of default is actually the notice to you advising you that you will go to foreclosure. However, the notice of sale will advise you of when the sale date will be if no arrangements have been made or agreed upon on the loan.
Okay. Let me go to another caller because I have clarifying questions I'd love to ask. Let's go to, and I believe it's going to be Jorge, or give us your name in Corona. Jorge, you're on the air. What's your question?
My question actually is I've been dealing with the bank, and they did one actually modification like a year ago, and actually the balance and the payments were up to almost over $5,000 a month, so they help us to reduce the payments to about $200. Then I asked them if they can help us to remodify to the value of the home, which went down half of the price. Right now, my house is worth $275,000, and the balance is $500,000. They do not want to negotiate with the government programs or anything like that. Every time that we call them, we have to get up at 4 a.m. in the morning because they goes all the way to India, and it's very hard to actually communicate with this bank. What do you recommend that I should do?
Great question, Jorge. I want to mention, Ryan, you've mentioned the loss mitigation department.
Correct.
I know from experience people who call and they do what you say, Melinda, they contact the lender, but frankly they're getting passed through to call centers, sometimes where they're having difficulty communicating, and sometimes where they have the distinct sense that these are collection individuals who are paid a commission based on bringing accounts current, and they are very aggressive. These are not people that they feel they can negotiate with in any way. Mm-hmm. In his case, so one, I'd like you to address that. Mm-hmm. How do you get through to somebody that really is willing to work with you? Mm-hmm. And then secondly, he mentioned his property, a $500,000 loan valued at $275,000, I think it was. That's dramatically underwater. Is it really worth, if you can't get a loan modification, is it worth extending it out another 10 years to try to catch up on that vanished equity and keep that home?
One of the things I would want to know, was he able to afford the payment that he's got now?
You'll have to make the assumption.
Okay, if he was able to afford the payment that he has now, and of course the feeling was the lost equity, And that is a very frustrating feeling. But we wouldn't want him to make a decision and then end up possibly doing, let's say, a short sale on a home, and then possibly there's tax consequences.
Talk to that a moment. I've heard of that. It's called phantom income. Is that right?
Correct. And I'm not an attorney and I'm not a CPA, so the
Fair
information I'm giving is just kind of informational. But what we have understood is from folks that, let's say there was a short sale on a home, and short sale means selling it for less than the balance on the loan, so there's a shortage. And then that shortage can be considered, as you mentioned, Roger, phantom income. If the loan that is being shorted was the original purchase loan, then it's considered often a non-recourse loan. So possibly there is a program called the Mortgage Forgiveness Act that's been extended to 2012.
Correct.
They may be able to avoid a tax consequence with that particular law. Other times people have taken maybe equity out of their home. So now it wasn't equity that improved the home or refied an old loan. It was actually equity that they took out to purchase a car, refinance credit card debt. That equity could have some ramifications that you
Correct.
described. And so in that situation, someone may be able to participate in what's called an insolvency clause in the IRS law. And the insolvency is where they're able to show that their debts exceed their assets, thereby they're insolvent, doesn't require them to go bankrupt. And then that insolvency, there's some lay language, easy to understand language at irs.gov that explains that. And again, if someone's pondering kind of a short sale because they feel like, they've just lost some monies out of their investment, they want to really make sure they also speak with the CPA, because you sure wouldn't want to have a tax consequence.
You mentioned before that a lender might agree to a short sale. Is that in the lender's purview, or can you just put the home on the market and sell it at a price less than you owe and call it a short sale? Who controls that?
The lender.
The lender does
The
control
lender.
that, right.
So if I tried to sell a home for which I owed $400,000 in principal and I sold it for $300,000, I couldn't do that and just call it a short sale.
No, it would not get through the escrow or the title and clear title. Exactly.
Okay. I've heard short sales a lot. Are those real? Do lenders really allow that? I mean, who makes them whole? Nobody does.
Yes, there's a loss there, and case by case, but yeah, there would be a loss there for the lender, but sometimes it may be the best solution because there's less cost versus running through a lengthy foreclosure and other issues involved. So they kind of have to look at things, and again, if they offer that with that particular loan.
It seems on its face logical as a lender, to allow a short sale, because that is very akin to if you foreclosed, took possession as the bank of the home, and then attempted to sell it. You would sell it for a value probably less than what the principal was originally anyway, and that's in effect a short sale. You just had to kick the people out, or eventually through the foreclosure.
Right, and then
Correct.
you had to market the property.
Right. So there's some incentive, I imagine, to save those steps and get the property sold and the whole loss off your books quicker, is there not?
For some lenders, that is something that they consider. For others, investment property, backed property, that may not be.
Okay, and Ryan, I'm going to address this to you. Melinda, feel free to jump in.
Okay.
We talked about that loss mitigation department versus what I think of as the collections department. So address that for a moment. I do know people that are getting these call centers that are outside of our borders.
Correct. You do have some companies that have outsourced jobs, or the loss mitigation or collections department for that matter, just to cut costs. However, when a homeowner makes the initial contact with their lender, they do not want to speak with customer service. They're just going to hear about their taxes, the insurance, anything else about the loan itself. They don't want to speak with collections, because collections, it's self-explanatory. They're just there to collect payments. However, they want to make sure that they're speaking with the loss mitigation department, and that department specializes in any sort of workout, whether it be a loan modification, the new Obama plan, forbearance, or a repayment plan. The word loss mitigation is a fancy word for mitigating loss for not only the bank but the investor as well.
And that's common. Each of the banks should have that department. They'll
Correct.
recognize that phrase. And is there any reluctance on the part of the collections department to transfer you or give you a direct number?
No.
No, because you work with these people all the time, do you not?
Exactly.
Wonderful.
I even came from one of them. So.
Okay, great. So let's take another call because I have
Sure.
many. Let's go out to Sam from Desert Hot Springs. Thank you for your patience. What's your call, Sam? Sam, I know you're with us.
Is there a law to that?
Yes, you're on the air.
It is?
What's your question, Sam?
Okay, there is a law to...
Yes, I'm here.
Okay,
Yes.
Sam, I'm going to circle back. Sorry about that. Let's jump to Beverly Hills. Thank you for calling. Maria, you're on the air. What's your question?
Hi, hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
Hi, I have are there any programs that just refinance your second mortgage or your second loan?
Oh, good question. Well, you refinance just the second. That, by the way, adds complication for a lot of these workouts, a lot of these short sales, does it not, seconds?
The Making Home Affordable rolled out, I believe, last month, a program, assuming that her loan is under that program, that's called the Second Lien program, because they found 50% of the loans that were having issues had second liens.
So what are the options available for the seconds? A lot of people I know pulled the equity out of their home when things were good, maybe not even up to 100% of the value. They might have been a little more conservative, and they watched the principal plummet below the amount that they owe between the combined first and second. Any renegotiation options for those?
In most cases, from what I've seen, seconds usually end up being an equity line, which are treated like credit cards. And for the most part, equity lines have not had any sort of modification program rolled out yet. Most lenders are anticipating on adapting a program, but it's going to be roughly about another 30 to 60 days before they even get any information through their pipeline on what's going to be available for those particular loans.
Okay, so Melinda, you gave us a hint that there is a new program rolled out, and Ryan, I heard from you that it's going to be a little bit more delayed. Crystallize that a little bit for me.
Are you speaking for the home equity line of credit, the HELOC?
Exactly.
He's
The
speaking
HELOC.
for the HELOC, which is a home equity line of credit, which can be a large amount of money, almost like a credit card. And then what I'm speaking of is the true second trustee, the true second lien.
Okay, so there's there's a new program for the true second, but there's nothing yet for the equity lines that are treated like the credit cards.
Correct.
I'm going to cut you off, jump to another call because we're running out of time and we have plenty of callers. Let's go to Tony in Palm Springs. Thank you for calling, Tony. What's your question?
Yes. I wanted to know how devastating a foreclosure is going to be to a FICO score, knowing the magnitude of this recession. It's a very universal recession as well as a global recession. How much emphasis, if I was going through a foreclosure now, which I'm not, but I have friends that are, how much of that FICO scoring is going to affect somebody if they apply for a mortgage, let's say 2014?
Great question. I'm going to cut you off there because we're running out of time. Go ahead and tell us, is it worse than a bankruptcy? Does it make it impossible to buy a new property for a certain number of years?
Well, he mentioned a key thing there in his question, which was really good, about it was going to be looking at buying a home in, I think he said 2013, 2014. So having a foreclosure is going to damage the credit rating, the FICO, Fair Isaac Corporation score. It is going to damage it, but you can become a homeowner again. There's even programs 3 years out as far as if you haven't owned a home in the last 3 years, you're eligible for a first-time home buyer program, considering you meet other criteria with good credit. And how do you get the good credit? One of the things that's important is if they do have a foreclosure, which I would assume is beyond their control, that happens, is to reestablish credit after the foreclosure. And again, it seems kind of counterintuitive because folks kind of shut down and maybe don't want to use their credit after a foreclosure, often because credit lines have even been shut down and they can't use it. So what we encourage people to do is on any existing credit line, make current on-time payments, because FICO takes points away for the slow pays, but they give you points back for the on-time payments. So it's
That's
very
great.
important to reestablish.
Okay, so we're out of time, unfortunately, and I want to say to our callers, I'm sorry that I couldn't get to all your calls. We love having guests of your caliber on here. Thank you for coming into our studio. I want to thank our guests, Ryan Escamilla-Woods and Melinda Opperman. Thank you for tuning in to our viewers. And next week, this will be another one of our foreclosure and facing the mortgage crisis episodes. We're in the third of our series of 10. I'm Roger Bowman, and remember, it's your call. Thank you for tuning in.